General Hospital spoilers tease that one of the storylines slowly spiraling into smoldering chaos is the increasingly baffling behavior of Willow, which is leading to complex psychological shifts and plunging the entire Corinthos family into an unprecedented state of turmoil. Willow, once known for her calm demeanor, gentleness, and deep compassion, has now become the focal point of suspicion and trouble as she begins to act in a quiet, withdrawn, and somewhat detached manner from those who once served as her emotional anchors. While Michael is missing amid a string of mysteries in Germany, Willow's efforts to reach him are inexplicably blocked. Every message goes unanswered, every call fails to get through, and every attempt via nurses and hospital staff leads to the same heartbreaking response: Michael doesn't want to see her. That response strikes a devastating blow to Willow's heart, pushing her into a silent depression, isolating herself, and allowing speculation and emotion to consume her from within. While Carly tries to offer explanations and Sunny remains cautiously observant, it is Jason who begins to act in an extreme and misguided manner. Instead of gently reaching out to understand what's going on inside Willow's mind, Jason shifts his attitude, from empathetic to suspicious, from quiet concern to pressure and interrogation. In Jason's mind, Willow must be hiding something, and rather than approaching her with trust, he chooses control. He suspects she might be under manipulation, or worse, the one complicating Michael's situation. And so, one of Jason's gravest mistakes begins to take shape, born from the false belief that he is protecting his family. Jason arranges talks with Willow, not to ask how she feels, but to extract what she might be hiding. His words are forceful, his gaze no longer empathetic but accusatory. Already fragile from everything involving Michael, Willow is now deeply wounded that the person she trusted the most is the first to suspect her. Instead of opening up, she retreats, going silent and pulling away into a space where she no longer feels safe with anyone, even Jason. Jason's misguided adjustments not only hurt Willow but push her dangerously close to a mental breakdown. She no longer knows whom to trust or who's on her side, especially when even Jason, the symbol of loyalty and reason, has turned his back on her. Worse still, during this time of chaos, the first signs of a true conspiracy behind Michael's disappearance begin to surface. Carly starts noticing gaps in the nurse's statements, unbelievable coincidences with redirected calls, and, most importantly, that Michael never actually said he didn't want to see Willow. When word leaks that Drew may have orchestrated a string of lies to keep Willow and Michael apart, all suspicion should have shifted to him. But because Jason had already taken a judgmental approach toward Willow, he now faces a bitter truth: instead of protecting the innocent, he contributed to her isolation, an isolation no one deserves. In her quiet depression, Willow is not only heartbroken over Michael's supposed rejection but crushed by Jason's betrayal. The man who once stood for strength and protection is now the one who scrutinizes her most. She no longer feels like part of the Corinthos family, increasingly sensing she's become an outsider, when she should have been the one most cared for and defended. She is hiding nothing. But Jason's suspicion has turned her into a psychological case, dissected without ever being given the chance to explain. Then, when the truth about the plot to block Willow from seeing Michael is finally exposed, when Carly uncovers hidden details in the hospital's communication logs in Germany, when Sunny begins to suspect Drew forged the nurse's statements, and when evidence surfaces that Michael never even knew Willow came to find him, Jason is left stunned. He realizes he made the gravest mistake of all, acting on misjudgment and emotion, believing he was protecting his family, when in reality, he was crushing the spirit of the only person still fighting to bring Michael back, Willow. This reckless adjustment wasn't just a strategic error, it was a freefall into a chasm of loss, where trust is warped, bonds shattered, and former allies now stand on opposite sides. Jason, once the pillar holding up the system around Michael, has now shaken its very foundation. When Willow decides she no longer wants to see Jason, when she calmly but painfully says she no longer believes in how he protects people, Jason is forced to face the hardest truth. It wasn't that he didn't act, but that he acted wrongly. And the price is no longer theoretical, it's a woman breaking down right before him in the very house that once symbolized safety. Michael, meanwhile, genuinely wants to see Willow. His heart still beats for her despite all the distance and obstacles. But cruelly, just as he longs to reunite with his beloved wife. A new story is taking shape, one that spins everything into an uncontrollable spiral. Something strange is happening around him, silent but powerful shifts, interrupted actions, undelivered messages. Unanswered calls, all pointing to a hidden force manipulating the entire situation, keeping Michael from reaching Willow no matter how hard he tries. What should have been a simple story, a man wanting to see the woman he loves, has been distorted into a prolonged chain of disappointment and misunderstanding. Willow had come to Germany, waited, begged to see Michael, but every door was closed. She didn't know that Michael had never received her messages, had never heard her pleas. And the cruelest twist? Michael didn't know she had ever come. He only saw the silence and believed Willow chose to walk away. Now, as the truth is slowly unveiled, and each layer of deceit is peeled away, Michael is plunged into emotional chaos. A real shock hits Michael as he realizes the people around him, the ones supposedly protecting him, are actually the ones preventing him from learning the truth. He starts to ask. Who canceled their meetings? Who manipulated the nurse and diverted the information? And why didn't Jason, the brother figure he trusted most, see this sooner? These unanswered questions are pushing Michael to the edge. He starts giving orders, demanding action, not just investigation, but elimination of anything standing in the way of his reunion with Willow. But this leads to yet another dangerous shift. Michael is no longer the patient, composed son he once was. Deep wounds, isolation, and betrayal are transforming him into someone else, cold, decisive, and unforgiving. His orders to Jason are no longer suggestions, but commands. Michael no longer wants explanations or delays, he wants results. And if anyone stands in his way, even those he once loved, he's ready to push them aside. Jason sees this change clearly. He understands that Michael is entering a dangerous psychological state, a mix of despair and the desire for control. And that's what makes every action Jason takes under Michael's orders full of immense risk. On one hand, Jason wants to do the right thing and help Michael reunite with Willow. But on the other, he senses that Michael's decisions are no longer coming from a place of clarity, but from darkness, where anger and deep emotional wounds cloud his judgment. The more Jason acts on Michael's directives, the deeper he gets pulled into a string of misaligned actions, and the less he can see the end. From there, a new disaster begins to form. As Jason confronts the nurse, demands information from medical facilities without going through legal channels, and begins to intimidate hospital staff who treated Michael, a completely different picture is emerging. Jason, once the protector, is now becoming the suspect. While trying to unravel everything so Michael and Willow can reunite, he is unknowingly becoming the center of a dangerous legal fallout. Those around him begin to question Jason's motives. If he doesn't stop in time, both he and Michael could be dragged into a far greater crisis, one that threatens not just their family, but the law and their reputations. Michael, in his urgency, fails to see the boundary between protecting and overreaching. He doesn't realize that pushing Jason to act harder and faster is stripping him of his ability to assess the situation clearly. Now, the two men, once like brothers, are speeding toward the edge without brakes, while Willow, at the center of it all, sits quietly in the shadows, unaware that her love for Michael is now the spark behind a coming storm. And that is the tragedy. When a man wants to be loved, when a woman just wants to see the man she loves again, the world around them spins in reverse, creating a cascade of misjudgments, impositions, and warped intentions, leading to a disaster none of them could have imagined. Willow thinks Michael rejected her. Michael thinks Willow abandoned him. Jason thinks he's protecting them, while in reality, he's helping tear them further apart. And when the truth is finally exposed, will their love be strong enough to heal it all, or will everything collapse under the weight of missteps taken too far? Michael is going through one of the most intense periods of psychological suppression in his life, struggling not only with the physical injuries sustained during his treatment in Germany but also To see Willow, to ask her why she came to find him and then disappeared, to find out why his messages never reached her, and to hear the truth directly from the woman who once meant everything to him. But at the same time, he must confront a truth more terrifying than any wound on his body. What happened in his absence is far from simple. And the Port Charles he's returning to is no longer the same. One of the most haunting realizations for Michael is the feeling that he was deliberately controlled and isolated during his treatment. The walls around him weren't just made of bricks and mortar, but of distorted words, filtered information, and decisions made on his behalf without his knowledge. The more he investigates, the more convinced he becomes that Drew, someone he once considered a friend, a brother, and a key part of his family, was behind a series of calculated moves designed to keep him at a safe distance, separated from the people he needed most. This truth is suffocating. Not only has it stolen the time he should have used to heal things with Willow, but it's also cast him into a shadowy state where everything, even what he once trusted most, is now under suspicion. And just as Michael is preparing to return to Port Charles to uncover the truth, another story is brewing there, one that, once it reaches his ears, will make everything even more chaotic. Jason, who has been observing from afar and trying to control the situation in his own way, is beginning to believe something that seems illogical but is becoming increasingly plausible to him, that Willow is romantically involved with Drew. Their recent closeness, their shared appearances, and the fact that Drew was often the one passing information between Michael and Willow, all of this has led Jason to construct a narrative that, in his eyes, seems credible. Especially now, as Willow has grown increasingly distant, guarded, and reserved. This misdirected trust is triggering a dangerous psychological shift in Jason. He begins to distance himself from Willow, doubts everything she says, and in his attempts to protect Michael, ends up hurting Willow deeply. Willow, still clinging to hope that Michael loves her, now finds herself surrounded by suspicion from someone who once supported her during the hardest times. She can't understand why Jason has changed so suddenly, why he no longer listens to her, or why his actions feel more confrontational than supportive. For Willow, the real shock isn't just that Jason doubts her, but that she senses an invisible wedge forming between what she knows to be true and what others are choosing to believe. She knows the truth will eventually come out when Michael returns, but she fears he'll arrive with a heart poisoned by false assumptions. Willow never had romantic feelings for Drew. Everything she did was out of a desperate search for help during Michael's unexplained disappearance. But she knows that in times where trust is already fragile, even a single misunderstood glance can shatter an entire relationship. And when Michael finally returns to Port Charles, he won't just be confronting Willow, he'll be facing himself, with all the pain, misjudgments, and mistaken assumptions he embraced during his isolation. What should have been a heartfelt reunion is now being threatened by the twisted perceptions and misguided adjustments others have made on their behalf. Jason, despite acting out of loyalty and love for his family, is unintentionally becoming the very force that drives Michael and Willow apart once again. And that, ultimately, is the real tragedy, when love still exists, but trust has been distorted by fear and false whispers. Michael is returning with a resolve to uncover every secret. But the moment he opens the door to Willow, what will he find? A rekindled love, or the ruins of a past mangled by misguided decisions made by those who claim to protect him? Jason, meanwhile, is increasingly acting in contradiction to Michael's true desires. This quiet but growing disagreement is steering everything toward a cliff edge none of them anticipated. While Michael yearns to return to Port Charles to clear up the misunderstandings, to look Willow in the eyes and reaffirm the love still burning inside him, Jason is moving in the opposite direction, guided by his own assumptions about what's best for Michael. And that's the most dangerous part, when someone acts in the name of protection but refuses to actually listen to what the other person needs, everything begins to fall apart in silence. Jason believes Michael must be shielded from anything that could cause more pain, and in that subjective judgment, Willow becomes the primary target of his suspicion. Based on her recent closeness to Drew, her quiet but intense demeanor, Jason no longer sees Willow as Michael's faithful companion, but rather as an unpredictable variable, someone he believes may be hiding something. Instead of reconnecting her with Michael, Jason tries to keep them apart longer, hoping this will help Michael recover both physically and mentally. But these actions strike straight into Willow's already fragile heart. Already hurt by Michael's misunderstanding and refusal to see her, she's now faced with Jason's coldness, the one person she thought would stand by her in chaos. His distance, his chilling silence, and the scrutiny in his eyes not only hurt her but push her into a state of extreme defensiveness and alertness. Willow begins to feel surveilled, isolated, and viewed through a lens of suspicion, even though she's simply a woman fighting to hold on to the last piece of love she has left. She doesn't understand why Jason has changed. But she feels the emotional wall growing between her and Michael, a wall that's now impacting her mental state severely. In this vulnerable moment, a new sequence of events begins, hinting at an impending emotional explosion. Willow, in a final effort to break the divide, turns to private channels, defying every barrier Jason has put up. She writes letters, asks Brad to deliver messages, and even enlists Portia to double-check hospital records in Germany to prove that Michael never actually refused to see her. Piece by piece, the truth begins to emerge: the nurse's lies, the diverted calls, the cancelled meetings without explanation, all pointing to one thing: someone deliberately built a wall between Michael and Willow. And the person who unknowingly helped enforce it was Jason. When this truth reaches Michael, it won't just be a shock, it will be a deep fracture between him and the man he trusted more than anyone. Michael will realize that while he was fighting to return and reconnect with his love, Jason, whom he entrusted with everything, was making unilateral decisions that didn't reflect his wishes. This won't just feel like betrayal, it will ignite a silent rage, where trust is eroded piece by piece and brotherhood mutates into strained tension. In the end, all the misguided adjustments, the actions taken against Michael's true desires. Every time Jason thought for or decided for others, no longer represent loyalty, they become the catalyst for an explosion. A disaster is unfolding, as everyone begins to realize that those they trusted most were the ones who unknowingly drove them furthest apart. Willow may not easily forgive. Michael may not stay calm. And Jason will have to face the hardest question of all this time: who was he really protecting? And with the price now revealed, is his silence and dominance still responsibility, or simply a tragedy born from misplaced trust? Jason, once the symbol of loyalty and the unwavering force standing at the center of every storm to protect the Corinthos family, is now stepping into an entirely different chapter, one where loyalty is no longer a simple act of the heart, but a mask concealing misguided decisions. During the time Michael was undergoing treatment in Germany, Jason took it upon himself to keep everything stable back in Port Charles. He intervened in relationships, arranged conversations, and made critical decisions on Michael's behalf, including the choice to postpone any contact between Michael and Willow with the sole rationale of waiting for the right moment. But the tragedy lies exactly there. Jason never asked Michael if he wanted to wait. He never asked Willow how much she needed to see Michael. Jason simply followed his instincts, and in doing so, created a devastating rupture between two people who needed each other more than ever in that moment. Willow, drowning in solitude and pain, made the effort to cross oceans to see the man she loved, only to be rejected, blocked by falsified messages and cold explanations from hospital staff. She believed Michael had turned his back on her. She retreated, collapsed in silence. But what she didn't know was that Michael had never refused her. And Michael, too, had no idea that Willow had been there, waiting in the hospital corridor, sitting quietly outside his recovery room, never allowed to come in. When Michael discovered the truth, when he pieced together the fragments of a silent conspiracy, where no one outright lied, but everyone hid the most vital parts, he wasn't just shocked, he felt betrayed to his very core. The greatest shock didn't come from strangers. It came from Jason. Michael had always placed his absolute trust in Jason. He believed that if anyone understood him best, it was Jason, the man who didn't need many words to know what he was thinking. The man always standing behind him, ready to catch him when he fell. But now, as he looks back, Michael realizes Jason is no longer standing behind him, but in front of him, blocking his path. Deciding for him, and severing every line of connection between him and Willow. This wasn't protection. This was control. This was an invasion of emotional freedom. The tension between Michael and Jason didn't arrive suddenly. It crept in, eroding their bond little by little. First came the silent glances when Jason avoided mentioning Willow's name. Then came vague answers, explanations lacking in clarity. Finally, there was the suspicious silence every time Michael asked what had really happened. Doubt began to take root in Michael's mind. And when he confirmed that Willow had in fact traveled to Germany, that her calls were redirected, that the nurse had received unclear instructions from a close contact of Michael's to keep her away, every puzzle piece pointed to one name, Jason. From that moment on, an invisible wall began to form between them. Jason could feel the distance, yet he stubbornly held his ground. He believed he had done the right thing. That Michael wasn't mentally strong enough at the time to face his emotions. But in clinging to that conviction, Jason failed to recognize that Michael had changed. Michael was no longer the vulnerable boy. He was a grown man, a father, a husband, and someone with the right to make choices for his own life. And Jason had stolen that right from him, gently, but with devastating finality. When Willow learned the truth, what remained in her was quiet disappointment. She didn't confront Jason directly, but she stopped turning to him. She no longer confided in him, no longer sought his counsel. She no longer saw him as a pillar of support, and that, to Jason, was the greatest failure. Jason hadn't only lost Willow's trust. He was now standing on the brink of losing Michael, the man he once considered a brother. The fracture between Michael and Jason grew clearer with each passing day. They no longer sat together during family gatherings. Their conversations grew short, sparse, cold. They no longer shared knowing glances. Michael grew distant, detached. And in his eyes lingered something that had never been there before, suspicion. He began to question everything Jason had ever stood for. And Jason, no matter how much he tried to preserve appearances, couldn't deny that he had made a mistake. A mistake in not listening. A mistake in mistaking protection for control. A mistake in forgetting that sometimes what people need most isn't a barricade, but an open door to the truth, no matter how painful that truth may be. And when Jason stepped into a room and saw Michael sitting there, but Michael didn't stand, didn't smile, didn't say a word, that was the moment Jason understood that the distance between them could no longer be measured in words. It was the distance born of trust lost. It was the evidence of a once solid bond now cracking under the weight of what Jason believed was right. The story between Michael and Willow may still find its way back into the light. But between Michael and Jason, it will take more than an apology to rebuild. Because nothing hurts more than realizing the person who once kept you from falling is the very one who made you lose everything. And that is the deepest shock of all for a heart that has already been broken too many times.